Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at another buffed Pokemon from the Season 25 balance update, and that is Clefable. Clefable already had incredibly fast pacing due to Fairy Wind, but its charge attack Meteor Mash just got even cheaper. That means Meteor Mash is now a Steel-type clone of Frenzy Plant, and Clefable can spam out that charge attack every 5 Fairy Winds. With this blisteringly fast pacing, and with Moonblast for big same-type attack bonus damage, Clefable is suddenly looking interesting as a very strong anti-meta Fairy type that can break quite a few teams. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. Let's check out the newly buffed Clefable. Off to a great start in game number 1, Stunfisk into Shadow Scizor. Opponent safe switches into Gastrodon, and I will respond with Furret. Now Gastrodon, if it lands the Water Pulse, can flip switch here, so I'm more than happy to put up a shield, because I know that even a boosted Furret down a shield is still going to get some very nice damage against Shadow Scizor. The shield comes up from the Gastrodon, but pacing is not in their favor. Even down energy, Furret's able to outpace and make it to a second Trailblaze. Trailblaze gets no shield and Gastrodon gets KO'd. In comes Shadow Scizor. Scizor unable to get the farm down, Furret hangs on, and that forces the Shadow Scizor to launch a Night Slash. Night Slash takes the knockout, they do get the attack boost, and that is a little bit unfortunate. I'm going to fire off the discharge here. It is the worst charge attack to throw. Mud Bomb does more, but it covers for a catch onto a potential flying type. Scizor has enough energy for the Trailblaze. Shield comes up from the Stunfisk. That proves to be a good call. In the back, they have a Azumarill. I'm going to give Azumarill a 3-bubble head start. And even with a 3-bubble head start, they cannot win the zeros against Clefable. Look at this. They go for the player up, but look at the speed on Clefable. I'm already almost at back-to-back Meteor Mashes. Azumarill is very bulky, and I know a Moonblast plus a Mash is guaranteed to KO, so I just get the Meteor Mash here. It would have been charge attack priority if my opponent threw, but they didn't. Meteor Mash takes the knockout. In comes Shadow Scizor. They get the Bullet Punch down, but they don't have any energy because they threw the Trailblaze at the Stunfisk earlier on. So Stunfisk Mud Bomb takes the knockout, and we take the Game 1 win. Hopping into the next match, picking up a truly terrible lead, Stunfisk into Incinerate Gourgeist. I throw one Thundershock, safe switch into Furret. My opponent responds with a Bastiodon. Oh my goodness, day 1 of the season, people are breaking out the Bastiodons. You have got to be kidding me. The good news for me, if there's any good news about facing a Bastiodon, is that Bastiodon is actually kind of bad into Furret. Furret, as long as it has shields to work with, can ramp up enough that it should be able to flip switch. And flipping switch advantage will be very important. My opponent as well makes a big misplay. They throw on alignment. I can shield, and now I'm going to get the Trailblaze on perfect timing. And this should set up a diabolical farm down if they no-shield. They're going to no-shield Bastiodon, getting fully farmed down by the Furret. In comes Gourgeist, and Gourgeist does not want to take those boosted Sucker Punches, so they fire off the Seed Bomb instantly. Now I get to send out Clefable. Clefable, going to be incredibly fast to get the charge attacks. In the back is Doublade, and Doublade, I am very happy to have this on the Stunfisk, because Doublade is forced to go for non-same type attack bonus Sacred Swords. And Sacred Sword is really not going to do much. The thing to keep in mind is they have energy on their Gourgeist, and I have quite a bit of energy on my Clefable as well, so this endgame is going to be a bit of a tricky one. My opponent should always be no-shielding the Doublade, so what I'm going to do is farming up just shy of that Sacred Sword, taking the knockout, and then looking to chip them with the Mud Bomb. I know that potentially I may need 2 Mud Bombs plus some fast moves to KO, because they're going to be saving the shields from the energy from Clefable. So I bring in Clefable, fire off this Meteor Mash. Meteor Mash is going to be shielded up, and I get to Meteor Mash number 2. They have so much energy loaded on this Gourgeist. The Meteor Mash does get shielded, Gourgeist will fire off energy, and I decide to just let it go. They go for the Seed Bomb. That's not going to knock out, but they're at 2 more Seed Bombs right here. I decide to put up the shield because honestly I didn't know who won charge attack priority. It turns out it's not me. But the good news is I'm not in 1 Incinerate range on that Stunfisk. And Stunfisk does have residual energy, so Stunfisk is barely going to survive. Stunfisk makes it to the Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb KOs the Gourgeist. And despite a nightmare lead, we're able to take the win. Speaking of bad leads, it's not getting any easier in the next match. Stunfisk just getting bullied on the lead, as now Stunfisk leads into Shadow Dragon Breath Giratina. They fire off a Dragon Claw, in comes Corviknight, and a bad situation just gets even worse. I think if there's any chance in this game, I need to preserve HP on this Furret. So, even though this is only an air cutter, I'm actually going to put up a shield, because I want to try and stall out this timer, bank a ton of energy, and then just pivot back into the Stunfisk. This way, I can take advantage of the fact that my opponent decent timers, and just do what I can. Save energy and a ton of HP on the Furret, and then It's going to be tough, but I'm going to have to try and find some way to win this game. I will fire off this Mud Bomb, big damage onto the Giratina, and if they want to keep the Giratina around, they're going to have to put up a shield. Mud Bomb is going to be no shielded, taking the knockout. In the back is a Shadow Celio. Shadow Celio, they're really not going to appreciate this discharge damage. Discharge into the Celio is going to be shielded. There's the combo play with the Furret. Furret firing off the Trailblaze. Trailblaze into the Celio does get shielded. Celio tries to play to the CMP tie, but they do not win it. Furret winning charge attack priority, boosted Swift lands, and that's some very nice damage onto the Celio. Celio fires off the Surf. That's going to get Furret low. In comes Corviknight. Corviknight gets the farm down, but now I can send in Stunfisk. Stunfisk very close to the discharge. They'll fire off some energy, and I can close out the game with Clefable. Air Cutter lands. I survive on 1 HP, but with the boost, I didn't think that I was going to get that move, so I just switch into the Clefable, saving the knowledge that Clefable will be able to close out this game. Because all I have to do, basically, is just get to 2 Meteor Mashes. They're firing off boosted Air Cutter after boosted Air Cutter, and I can throw 1 in the move here because at 8 Fairy Winds, I'm only 2 away from a second Meteor Mash. So when they bring back in the Celio, Celio just gets outpaced. This pacing on Clefable was very, very impressive. Obviously it has Swift, but Swift doesn't really do any damage. Meteor Mash actually does an incredible amount of damage. Hopping into the next match, Stunfisk into Wigglytuff. Now this is a Pokemon that this team is ABA weak to, as both the Stunfisk and the Furret have losing matchups. Stunfisk fires off the Mud Bomb at the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff is going to be going for the Icy Wind, but Wigglytuff always just wins the zeros with Icy Wind into Swift. So my plan is pretty simple. Soft lose the zeros, go for massive farm on Clefable, and hope that Clefable will put in some good work in the back. My opponent makes a big misplay and they don't end up firing off their energy. So instead, I just get to take the zeros because they didn't throw their Swift. In comes a Licky Licky, I bank a move and I send in Furret. Now Licky Licky counts are not something that I am too familiar with. Licky Licky is probably running Shadow Ball as the second move, so it's going to be spamming out Body Slams. But roll out to Body Slam, I know it's going to be 3 to the first, but I assume there's probably some 2 cycles in there somewhere, and that's just not something that I am familiar with. Furret is going to be firing off Trailblaze, but at the moment that Trailblaze damage lands, I think that I should have just thrown the Swift. Because double Swift still would have done quite a bit of damage, and I guess Licky Licky is a bit more bulkier than I expected. And unfortunately, I clearly do not know the residuals for this Mon because I'm forced to go down both shields, and now I'm probably in trouble. I throw 2 and the move with the Furret, but I would really need them to be weak in the back to Clefable. Swift takes the KO, in the back is Empoleon, and there's just no way to win this game. Empoleon, they're going to be shielding up the Trailblaze, and they will get a full farm down. I have energy on the Stunfisk, but it's just simply not going to matter. We're met with another Gourgeist lead in the next match into our Stunfisk. I switch into the Furret, and my opponent actually decides to stay in and throw a Seed Bomb. This desyncs the switch timers. Seed Bomb lands, in comes Lapras. Oh my goodness, we are flipping switch. This is incredible. The fact that they sent in a Lapras and not something like a Bastiodon. Lapras is a relatively easy switch flip for the Furret. Furret's going to be shielding up as Lapras will fire off the Sparkling Aria. I will have to go down a shield, but my game plan's a pretty simple one. I just want to exit as boosted as possible. So even though a Swift would KO, I'm going to go for the Trailblaze. That way, if it is something like a Bastiodon in the back, then I can get as much damage as I possibly can into it. But that's not a Bastiodon, that's going to be a Shadow Celio. I bank a Trailblaze for later, send out the Stunfisk. Stunfisk will be taking big damage from Surf, but thankfully will be able to hang on. My opponent doesn't really have a reason to shield here, because Discharge, it's a pretty bad move. It will not take the knockout. However, getting the Celio so low is actually really nice, because now this can potentially set up farm for Clefable. So I send in Clefable, we get that Fairy Wind farm down, and back in comes the Gourgeist. And again, this pacing on Clefable is just relentless. Clefable spamming out Meteor Mash, getting that shield. Clefable continuing to farm. Opponent tries for a catch onto Lapras. Lapras gets fully Fairy Winded down. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Celio is back in the next match, leading into my Stunfisk. Now, Stunfisk will be able to outpace in this matchup. I decided to go for a bit of an overfarm and a no shield as I'm very comfortable taking a Surf. This is the non-Shadow Celio, so Surf's going to do quite a bit less than the Shadow. Discharge is going to land. My opponent should probably go for a catch here, but they don't, so it looks like they're going to go for a 1-shield farm down instead. That could get a little bit tricky, so I'm actually going to be saving the Stunfisk and sending out Furret. They do have enough for a Surf, so I will respect it with a shield, but they end up Body Slam baiting. A good bait from them, but they send out Azumarill. Azumarill, not necessarily an answer to Furret. Furret will be able to ramp up damage with Trailblaze and really make life difficult for them. Azumarill ends up throwing on Alignment, and that gives a free Sucker Punch of energy to the Furret. Furret now going to fire off the Trailblaze as soon as it gets it. The question is, with that little bit of extra Sucker Punch damage, can I Trailblaze and farm down? It's going to be very close. Come on, Furret. Furret just can't farm down. Azumarill with the 1 HP survived. That forces energy. That is a little bit unfortunate. In comes Celio. Celio taking some solid damage from the Sucker Punches, but Celio will be able to take the knockout with Body Slam. I send in Clefable. In the back is Galarian Corsola. I do know that this is a matchup that Clefable wins. I'm going to be no-shielding because they're going to land a Nightshade anyway. And I believe I win this just straight Meteor Mash. This is where this new pacing on Clefable is just absolutely absurd. They put up the shield, but just look at Clefable go. Clefable already almost at 2 more Meteor Mashes. Corsola is the king of neutral matchups, and it's losing to Clefable. Clefable able to take the knockout with Meteor Mash number 3. I undercharge it to try and leave them at 1 HP, but it's not going to work. In comes Stunfisk. It's a simultaneous knockout, and that game will end in a tie. We move to the next match, leading Stunfisk into Bastiodon. Opponent safe switches into Gourgeist, but after a long day of battling, I have bad reaction time, and I switch in 2 Thundershocks instead of 1. If you give Gourgeist enough of an energy head start, the Zeros actually get pretty uncomfortable here for the Furret. Furret is going to be firing off this Trailblaze. Trailblaze, of course, is going to be resisted, but it boosts up Furret's damage. Here, I never should have shielded this. I should have trusted that the high-rank Furret can barely hang on to the Seed Bomb and farm down, but I was worried. I didn't want to give up Switch, and I give my opponent a shield advantage. And I don't know it yet, but this shield advantage is going to lose me this game, because Bastiodon doesn't really care about Furret energy. Bastiodon is going to get a full farm down, and I don't really do a lot of damage, so my boosted energy doesn't really go anywhere. But in the back, they have Ludicolo. In evens, this is very fine for Clefable, but unfortunately being down a shield and now down a little bit of energy as well, this is actually losable. My opponent's just going to go for the Weather Ball and a farm down. The good news is I can spam out Meteor Mash baits. It's incredibly fast. The bad news is even if I double mash bait, I'm not going to get to a Moonblast. I'm just simply going to get outpaced. My only hope is that the Fairy Winds plus the Meteor Mash put it into a range where I can knock them out with Discharge. But man, at this point of the match, I am heavily regretting that shield on Furret. I fire off the Meteor Mash. If I didn't, they could have made a Weather Ball. Unfortunately, it just does not do enough damage. Even if I got a Discharge is a terrible move. It would not have KO'd. They get the Leaf Storm, and I'm too low. In comes Bastiodon. Bastiodon is going to be taking that game. So a very unfortunate game there. I think it was very winnable if I played better, but unfortunately, I didn't know the damage ranges. I shielded Furret, and it comes back to bite me. Great lead in the next match, Stunfisk into Lucario. My opponent safe switches into Shadow Sableye, and I will respond with Clefable. Clefable typically ends up being the more convincing counter swap, just because Furret does lose the Zeros to Shadow Sableye. They no-shield the Meteor Mash. Look at the damage. Shadow Sableye on 1 HP, returns fire with the Dazzling Gleam, but they undercharge. They're looking for farm. However, that undercharge means that I get a Meteor Mash. This is resisted damage, but look at that. Oh my goodness, that damage is just absolutely absurd. Back in comes the Stunfisk. Stunfisk firing off the Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb shielded up by the Lucario. And I know Lucario does have a ton of energy. Lucario is on Bullet Punch. Bullet Punch, I'm not super familiar with the counts on, and I accidentally played to a CMP tie that I do not win. Man, definitely not my A game on day 1 of the new season, but obviously as we learn the matchups and the counts, it'll get a lot cleaner. Mud Bomb will take the knockout. In the back is Galarian Moltres, and with the Clefable out of the way, Moltres is looking to sweep. Discharge is always going to be shielded up. It looks like I get farmed down, so I'm forced to send in Furret. This game will come down to a 50-50. I have to either successfully shield the Brave Bird or no shield a fly. If I don't get it right, I lose the game. It all comes down to this. I no shield. You have to Brave Bird to win. They go for the fly, and that's going to seal it, as Furret will be able to take the knockout with the Swift. And definitely not the cleanest game, but we're able to escape with the victory. Hopping into the final match, well, this is actually the first match that I did with the team, as you can tell by the fact that it's daylight and the other matches were done at night, but I did get the battles slightly out of order. Walrein does some pretty significant damage now with the buff to Icicle Spear and the buff to Powder Snow as well. This charge is going to land, Stunfisk will outpace, and my opponent is going to be making a catch onto Gourgeist. This charge not going to do much to Gourgeist, but if people are safe switching Gourgeist, I'm more than happy to send in Furret. Furret gonna fire off the Trailblaze. I know this doesn't knock out, so I will go for an Undercharge. The Undercharge is going to leave the Gourgeist with a decent amount of HP. They try and double up, and they're not going to get there, and they lose all that energy. Back in comes the Walrein. Walrein will take a massive amount of Furret's HP with his Icicle Spear, but Furret will be able to hang on. Oh my goodness, Furret going to go for a full farm down, getting the full farm down. In the back is Sableye, and they were just triple weak to Furret. Furret going absolutely crazy in this battle. We're able to make it to a second Trailblaze. This is now, I believe, about to be a +3 Furret. And I can just reveal it's Clefable in the back. And my opponent is going to stop tapping. We've already seen this Meteor Mash damage. Shadow Sableye, it's not surviving. Picking up the knockout and securing the win. And now some final thoughts on Clefable and this new buff to Meteor Mash. First off, Meteor Mash is an absolutely absurd move now. Meteor Mash is now a Steel-type clone of the move Frenzy Plant. I believe I mentioned that at the start of the video, but it's worth mentioning again. Steel-type clone of the move Frenzy Plant is absolutely crazy. Now, it's being able to spam out a Steel-type Frenzy Plant clone every 10 turns. That means that Clefable, it's able to get damage out in a hurry, and that's something that was a bit of an issue for it, because 665 pacing for Meteor Mash just didn't really cut it, because a lot of things could outpace. But having 10-turn pacing makes this Pokemon feel a lot more modern. Now, I do know that Clefable also has access to Swift, and I did consider Swift Meteor Mash for like the ultimate pacing demon, but I ultimately decided against it because I think that same type attack bonus Moonblast is an incredibly nice move when shields are down, or if you run into something like a water type that has a steel resistance, and then suddenly your Meteor Mashes are not as threatening as they typically would be. So I really like Clefable. I think it's a very strong anti-meta pick. I think it can definitely catch a lot of teams off guard. For example, I think it's going to be very difficult to build Carbink teams this season that are not very, very weak to Clefable, because obviously Clefable just has such a severe pacing advantage over Carbink, and Meteor Mash is going to inflict some devastating damage. I also do have an Ultra League Clefable, and I am very, very excited to try out the Ultra League Clefable because I know it has way more bulk in the Ultra League. I already think it's pretty solid in the Great League, very nice anti-meta, but in the Ultra League, this thing might be an absolute terror. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.